North Carolina, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you briefly touched on that as well, but you were in the Navy. How many
Yes.
stuff did you do? Just, yeah. Briefly talk about that, because I'm having a feeling that is there anything challenging that you? Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Be Inspired podcast. I talk about entrepreneurship, Afrocentric, and travel. My name is Charles Shima, your host. On today's show, I have an amazing human being. She is a grandmother, a founder of 2 startups. She is a family physician. Ladies and gentlemen, in her own words, Dr. Allen, welcome to the show. Dr. Allen, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to having you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Likewise. We met last year at Black Travel Summit in Miami.
Yes.
And we had a great time. We danced to the song I wrote, 24, the Kinyarwanda song. It was really lovely. And I met your amazing husband as well.
My silent partner.
Yes. And my apologies, partner or husband?
Pardon me, say that again.
Partner or husband? Just make sure that I didn't.
He is my husband. Say my silent partner in the business.
Great. So since we met, it's almost in a few months, it's going to be a year. We've been talking and we are both passionate travel tech founders, and you are building something amazing you are going to share. And I wanted to have you on my show primarily because I was truly and humbly very much so inspired when I met you and your lovely spouse. The stories of us meaning in the global diaspora in the US, African American, is largely distorted and not told by us. And so I have come to realize that over 25 years that I've lived in North America, my real interaction with African Americans or Black Americans have been very limited. And I am on a quest to really have conversations like this and talk about the work we are doing and from it, but also inspire the youth. So that being said, please take us to the beginning. Were you born? Tell us about your childhood as much as you can share. And as we get into what you are building.
Okay. I grew up in rural North Carolina, very small community. We had a mixture of Black and white. However, my school was almost all white, interestingly enough. It's probably less than 10% African American and very little of anything else at that time. My were blue workers. My father was a construction worker, had his own carpentry business. My mom worked in a factory initially and went and got her degree. So she's part of my inspiration. But, we did a lot of traveling within, on the East Coast. So we did a lot of traveling up and down the East Coast to visit family. So I really enjoyed traveling then. They actually taught me the travel, but they made our trips fun in the sense that we stopped along the way to have picnics, and we rest stop. I collected all of the brochures so I could read about the different things. We would stop along the way to see sites, and so instilled in me a love of travel early on, but grew, I think, probably after medical school. Or during medical school, but I had that travel bug to some extent early on in life.
Wonderful. And so North Carolina, right? That's where you're born, in a small town. What was the name? What's the name of the small town where?
Altamahal, ICP. Altamahal, ICP.
Okay, we're going to write that down or just, and try to Google it. And so how was it? Was it up then? I mean, we reveal how old you are, but I'm sure,
I don't have a problem with telling my age.
Okay, yeah, because it's great to have sort of a timeline, right? Because I guess in our prior conversation, I remember you mentioned that when you joined school, that was the end, towards the end of segregation,
Yes.
segregated school, which
Yes.
was when?
So I started first grade, I think, in 1973, and my school had just integrated, maybe the year before. So, before school, it wasn't even clear where I would go to school. The elementary school that I attended was closest to my home, but right before I started school, all of the an all black school. So it was interesting times when I started. Fortunately, we didn't have problems. I had some racism going on, but it was something that my 5-6-year-old mind did not understand, and it did not affect me until later.
And the small town where you grew up, how was it during that time? Just paint the picture. I mean, was it hard to have black people living there on side, and was it pretty much segregated, or was it mixed? And
so I guess a little of both. So there was definitely a side of town that had all the black people, but because it was a rural area, it was probably a little more mixed than other parts of North Carolina. When you live in a rural area, because there's a space between houses, you tend to get a little more integration as far as where people live than you would in the city. So where I lived, there were other black families, but there were also white families, and they were I lived on the dirt road, and they were kind of further down the road. So but even surrounding them, they had people that worked their farm for them that lived around them. So there were always black and white people living in the same area.
Right.
Even though there was there were a town where you knew black people lived here and white people lived here.
And so you said farm. So were your parents farmers?
My parents weren't, but my grandparents were. So I literally grew up on farms, both tobacco farms and animal farms.
Nice. And I think you may have, was it your grandma or your great grandma that lived through the challenging time, the slavery time?
So my great grandmother, she would tell us stories about her parents were slaves. And based on the story she told us, it sounded like maybe she was born into slavery. I couldn't quite get the whole picture at the time. But she told us stories that her parents told her. And, I wish at the time I could have had the insight to record those tales. Because she was a really interesting woman, and she loved to tell stories, and we would, sit and listen to her tales.
Absolutely. I was born in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo. It was known as Zaire. And what the world doesn't know is that I was born in the late 70s, and the westernization as we know it, even though the president back then, Mobutu Sese Seko Kukungu Azama, got the long name, even though he had started what they called authenticity, he wanted to go back to their roots. That's why he even named the country Zaire, to speak their language, to use their names, not the Belgians or the colonial sort of names. It was a very, very interesting time. However, at the same time, the westernization was so strong. And I'm saying this because on the national TV, there was a TV show, Roots. I was watching it in French then, Hassin, and it was one of my favorite TV shows to this day, because the character in that show, Kunta Kinte, named Toby, we can say it was my first superhero, just because of the way he resisted everything that was happening. And I was young, of course. My 7-year-old, right? So the way we react to such a story, it's not so deep. You see this young man and resisting, but it really something magical. I think every strength I have today always go back to the character I saw in that show. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying this because that was my first introduction to the African American history,
okay,
which was really right. And I appreciate, because some of us really, because we grew up in the Francophone world, not in an English-speaking world. So the introduction usually comes through TV shows and so on and so on. So I'm really glad that my first introduction to the African American history was a sad one, but a positive through the eyes of Kunta Kinte. And so, yeah. Now, for you, I just had to say that because that's one story that has really marked me to this date, and so on. And so, what I'm wondering is, everything you've known in now, let's say, in the history, what would you say has been most of an impactful for what you may have heard? Let's say not read, but what maybe you may have heard from your great grandmother, maybe even your parents that you may have seen that may have shaped you as a person to who you are today.
You know, there are things, but the first thing that popped in my mind is I remember growing up, my white friends went to the beach, you know, the North Carolina famous beaches. And they always spent summers in the beach, and I couldn't understand why we never went to the beach. And my parents told me that Black people don't go to the beach. And, you know, at the time, it didn't make any sense to me because why would we not go to the beach? And then I found out that we weren't allowed on the beach. Probably when I was up, it was okay. But when they were growing up, they were not allowed on the beaches. So therefore, we didn't go to beaches. The other thing that they weren't allowed to do, which seemed so strange at the time to my little mind, is they had to walk on a certain side of the street. So when they went downtown, they could not walk on the same side of the street that the white people walked on. And that was just, I don't know, that was just so impactful to me because I couldn't wrap my mind around it. But now to just about, you know, during my parents' lifetime, they did not experience maybe the segregation or that their grandparents experienced, but they experienced their own form, and it was just as traumatic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work trauma as well. That's another topic there. Now, back to you. So, school, and so take us to how you became a doctor, a family physician, because Black doctors, I mean, it's still kind of rare.
Right. They're resistant in my community. I had never seen a Black doctor, it didn't even occur to me that Black doctors existed as a little girl. I actually wanted to be a school teacher. And I wanted to be a school teacher until high school. And in high school, I had a biology teacher, a white man. And he, he talked to my, what I wanted to when I finished school. And I told him my dreams and desires. And he says, yeah, that's all we thought about being a doctor. And I'm like, doctor? He says, you're very good in the sciences. You're very good in the math. I think you would be a good doctor. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, doctor, where did he come up with this? But, that was just that little piece of sand that I needed. So I started researching. I remember the first medical show that I saw on TV. It wasn't that, we are all from back in the day. This was more like of ER events. And the things that they were doing and kind of like reality. I was like, oh my God, I want to do this. I want to help people. I want to have this adrenaline rush. I want to do this. Yes. And so, I made on that, hey, I'm going to be a Black doctor. And, maybe I can Black kids to become a doctor. So that's how I ended up from thinking I'm going to be a teacher to deciding that I'm going to be a doctor.
Yes, because research, I think today, Black doctors, they make up only 5.7%, I believe.
Even less then.
Even less. So versus maybe the Asian who are maybe 17, something around that range. So we need more doctors. We need more Black doctors. If the kids are listening.
Absolutely. And the research is clear that Black doctors tend to stay in communities or communities of color, and also communities where they're economically managed. And Black patients respond better to doctors that look like them, and they get better care when they have doctors that look like them.
Absolutely. And so you became a doctor. What when you graduated? I mean, they must. Where you school when you were? I mean, a woman, Black doctor.
Right. So one of the things. So I actually, when I left high school, I joined the military. I was in it 4 years, and during the Navy, I did community, transferred those credits to University of Pennsylvania. Lived in Philadelphia for 9 years after getting out of the Navy. And when I was in Philadelphia and I was applying to medical schools, I applied to a lot of medical schools, as most people do. But I applied to University Medical School. At the time, it was called Bowman Gray. And it was a private school. It had a reputation of being a very good school, but predominantly white school. So it was not a place that that Black students would typically think they could go. But when I went for the interview, I found out that they were really dedicated to getting Black students and students of color involved in their medical school. So they had a program where they decided that they're going to take at least 10% candidates of color. And that was so impressive to me because no one else was doing that at the time. Everyone was like, we don't want this to race space. But they recognized early on the importance of having Black students and students of color in their school. And so I ended up going to there and absolutely loved it. Wake Forest was they were wonderful to the students of color. They were very committed to making sure that we had the resources that we needed to succeed.
Great. You said the name of the school is what? Wake Forest?
Wake Forest University School of Medicine. And that was I started in 1998 and finished in 2002.
Nice. Shout out to that school.
Yes, definitely. And they're still committed to that. I am on their Medical Alumni Association, and they are still committed to having students of color at least 10% and more if they can get it.
Located in, where is the school?
It's in North Carolina.
North Carolina, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you briefly touched on as well that you were in the Navy. What did you do? Briefly talk about that, because I'm having a feeling that is there anything challenging that you didn't do? Everything I hear, medical doctor.
It's interesting you said that, because I used to tell people, I don't talk about it as much now, but I used to tell people if it was legal, I've done it.
It's legal, I've done it.
Yes, I have worked so many different places and done so many different things.
I must say, Dr. Aaron, you are very inspiring. You can see I'm just in awe, and well done in every bit. And I've met a lot of people in my life, and really you are one of a kind. And I'm so glad we are having this conversation, because the negativity that surrounds African Americans is huge. It's massive. You almost feel like if you're not a basketball player or a rapper, it's just that world, which is fine, right? That's also success,
right?
However, that is a very it's some success. As the normal who want to become doctors and lawyers, why not, or even YouTubers nowadays, right? Something that is more attainable, not just related to I have the sports skills. When I went to Japan there the first time, side note, because I was an avid traveler in a small town. I have lived in my own small towns even when I came to Canada. And going to the going to Japan, I was in the north, in Hakodate. Students, when they see me, even though I said I was from Rwanda, they say, Michael Jordan. And for the love of me, they wanted me to play basketball. Now,
Yes.
I was just 2 years in North America, haven't quite comprehend why they was associate the black tall person with basketball. And I am the least sports person on the planet. I don't even watch those games. I don't. And that's not all. They used to wake me up at 3 a.m. to go play baseball. And I'm like, I'm from Africa in Rwanda. I mean, what's baseball? At least, football, I can pretend. Pressure. You're putting a lot of pressure on me here. I just came here to learn the language.
You have to represent the race. That's what we're expected to do.
Yes. That's where I realized that this is going to be long years ahead of me. So Navy, you've done all that great things. Are you still practicing, by the way, or are you retired?
I am. So I went into family medicine because at the time I really thought that I was going to open my own practice in a rural area and take care of my people. Things didn't work out that way, and I'm glad. But what I did is I became a traveling physician, kind of like traveling nursing. Okay. I went to the U.S. and I tended to work in rural areas. Initially, I worked in rural areas that were economically disadvantaged, and doctors there. So that's how I started out my career, and I'm still doing that somewhat, but I'm slowing down now that I've my new business. But I work in a hospital as a hospitalist. So I do that maybe a week a month. And so if you're in the hospital and you have pneumonia or heart attack or whatever, I would be the doctor taking care of you, along with the specialist if needed.
Yeah, I mean, so travel seems to have always a circle. And yes. You've traveled to how many countries? 50 plus? 50,
yeah, somewhere in 53, 56 range. Yeah.
Tell us about the first time in the US. Where did you go? What happened there? That first country you traveled to.
I traveled to that really set off that travel bug was Mexico. And at the time, I was in medical school. I was going to my fourth year, and in fourth year, you do a rotation away in another state, or, you go overseas if you want to. And I got it in my mind that I wanted to learn Spanish. And I convinced my dean that I needed to learn Spanish to practice medicine successfully in my rural community with people of color. And my dean was like, sure, go for it. So I arranged a rotation where I spent a month in Mexico on a Spanish immersion course, and I stayed with a family who they were really great. They took me to hospitals and places to see how healthcare was done in their country that may be differently than in our country. And that's when I fell in love with travel. I was like, oh my goodness, I have to do more of this. I loved Mexico. It was such an awesome experience for me.
Where in Mexico did you go? Did you go ahead?
Cuernavaca. It's called Cuernavaca. And it's maybe an hour and a half outside of Mexico City, but it's a really area of Mexico. And I think probably the standard of living is a little higher there than in maybe some other areas, but it was just, the people were great. The food was delicious. It was just really a wonderful experience.
Wow, Mexico. I have not been to Mexico, but I'm planning to at some point. And that was your first country. And can you tell us you are still in North America now. What is the first country you visited outside of North America or Latin America? So that could be Europe, Africa, where did you go next?
So next was Europe. I finished residency. I decided that I was going to backpack around Europe for 2 months. Was it 2 months or 3 months? I think it was 2 months. I think I did.
Did you say backpacking?
Yes.
I always hear that only white people do that.
That's what everyone told me. They were like, you're not going to do that. Black people don't do that. But I left with a backpack solo. I planned my trip out in advance, not totally planned, but I planned the countries that I would go to. And I got my passport in my backpack, and I trekked around Europe for 2 months. So I landed in the UK first, so London. So I spent the first week in London, and man, literally at the end of those 2 months, I was not ready to come home. It was, oh my goodness. I can it still brings chills to think about all of the fun I had.
I mean, if we had TikTok back then, you would have had the followers.
Yes. My husband tells me, he's like, how successful you probably would have been if they had been. Because I have my own little following of email people that were following me vicariously. And they would say, oh, I didn't get your email. Where are your pictures?
Yes. Because what year was that when you traveled to the UK?
So I finished residency in 2005. So in 2005, I went to the UK and then Europe for the 2 months.
So I can see you holding a Lonely Planet maybe and a map.
Yes. Lonely Planet was my friend. Lonely Planet. And then there was Photos, and there was one other one, but those two. Lonely Planet was I had, a book for each.
You may have to tell the Gen Lonely Planet is, they may be wondering, what is that, some kind of app? Maybe
oh my goodness. They probably, I'm sure they've got an app now, but Lonely Planet was the go-to book for housing, food, for good restaurants, for places to visit. Kind of like what your new platform is, Terrific.
Yes, the future is here. And I've been thinking back then, and how I used to travel, and today how people, I mean, if you didn't know then, but so money, travelers, what I remember. What did you use? Did you use travelers checks or?
I did not, because back then, when I went to Europe, traveler checks were falling out of favor. So it was a combination of exchanging money, and you learn really quickly not to do it in the airport, to try to do it at an ATM outside of the airport. And credit cards to some extent, not as credit cards were accepted then, and I would go off the beaten path. So places that I end up, they're not necessarily credit card friendly, but it was more the cash. Cash was king back then. And I remember internet cafes. They were my best friends.
Oh, yes. I have a regret recently, because my computer broke down, and I was like, why did they close internet cafe? Why? I mean, we should have kept at least one. Yes, those days. Interesting enough, the most country in the world, Japan, they have internet cafes. They still have those phone books. They keep
yes.
You see, I don't know. It must be even up until now. My wife, who is from Japan, she refuses to get rid of those dial phones. We still, I mean, it's not dial phone, but we still have those phones. Like, I'm like, dial phones now. Why do we need those old school phones? She's like, you never know. At the end of the world, the dial phones won't work. So it must be a Japanese mindset. It's like, as much as they have so much gadgets, they still pull gadgets as well. And the most interesting country you've visited in terms of anything interesting. I mean, it could be language challenge or being lost. Where are we?
I would say Madagascar. So my husband and I spent, I think, 2 weeks in Madagascar, and we traveled around the country with a guide, and we, of course, hit all of those off the beaten path places. And it's such a poor country. And we knew before we went that it was a poor country, but you just can't imagine how poor until you are there. It's an extremely poor country, but that being said, the people are so giving and so just with their time, with their, they're just good, nice people. And I think that's a country that has had the impact on me. Just seeing how these people are so poor, but they're still willing to give to foreigners.
Yes, Madagascar, on the continent of Africa. I found that on the continent of Africa, I grew up in Rwanda, so that sort of tendency of, I guess maybe it's the community is just about me.
Right.
And even when we left Rwanda during the genocide against the Tutsi after the fact, and I was in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, we surprised the population. I mean, can you imagine a small town that can take up no more than 50,000 people? These are small towns, in terms of all the amenities city small handle. Suddenly you have hundreds of thousands of people crossing the border, landing in your town. And so this must be said. I mean, the way we were welcomed, at least in the beginning, by the local population, it was amazing. I am always grateful to have seen that level of hospitality in terms of need and so on. I have not been to Madagascar. I got to put that on my note. So now that we know who you are, Navy, grew up in a rural, amazing person, beautiful spirit, inspiring in so many ways, physician. Is there anything else you have that is legal before we jump into the founding of a startup? Because that's where we are heading now.
Yeah. Well, one of my things I really important back, and that's something that I have tried to do all my life. Whether it's working with the Boys and Girls Club, volunteering, or my medical services and medical missions. That's probably the other big part of my life that I really cherish, and I think is so important to give back.
Tell us about your startup.
Okay, Travel to Go. Of course, as I said, I love traveling, have done a lot of traveling, 50 plus countries. And one of the things that I found was that my primary care physicians would not write for pre-travel medications like Malarone for prophylaxis, or something for diarrhea, or something for motion sickness. They just weren't, either they weren't comfortable doing it, or they just didn't have time. So they would send me to travel clinics. And I remember the first travel clinic I went to, and I had such a sticker shock. I think it was like $500 and some. And don't get me wrong, clinics have their place, because, as an online business, I can't do vaccines, obviously. So they're great for that. But when it comes to getting medications like Malarone, which is a, well-proven medication that's proven to be safe and effective, side effects, why should I have to go to a travel clinic to get that when I have a primary care doctor that could, in my mind, easily prescribe it? And I started thinking about it, and I started talking to other people, and other travelers would tell me, yeah, my primary care doctor or, nurse practitioner will not prescribe it to me. I found out there are a lot of people out there that can't get those medications without going to a travel clinic and spending a lot of money. So I got the idea to start my online business to help those people. So that's how we came up with Travel Meds to Go.
Yes, I really like what you are doing, and you are solving a real problem as a traveler. You definitely have to make sure that whenever you travel, you have that pre-care before, because it's when you travel then things go wrong, when you get sick, when you have food poisoning, when you eat the wrong food, and then yes, you have to think about that. So I really like what you are doing. But you do more than that though, in terms of the products that you offer on your platform. Can you tell us about those services as well? Yes.
So I also offer, prescription medication refills for those people that are either between doctors, or they just can't get in to see their doctor, because, as you know, we have a huge problem with healthcare access in this country. So I wanted to be someone there to fill in gap not take the of your primary doctor, but at least fill in that gap so that you could get those prescription refills. Also to treat minor urgent care things like tract infection. I'm sure there are lots of women that can recall Friday night getting those symptoms, starting to have pain when you urinate, and you call your doctor's office and someone's on call and they tell you to go to urgent care and get tested. And then by the time you get there and you've all of this money for something that it's a urinary tract infection, you've had them multiple times in the past. So I'm there to treat those things that are minor urgent care type issues that can be treated without being in person.
Yes, that was going to be my next question, because whenever I travel to the US, I always say, is this a country or is this a continent? It's massive. It's huge. It's huge, the US. I'm just like in Atlanta and even for I who has traveled the world quite a bit, including Tokyo, I was thinking like, wow. And so your services are available in how many states?
Right now, I'm available in 11 states, branching off soon to states. I'm in the process of platforms. So once I platforms, I will be available in 18 states. And I'm working on more states. My goal is to people in all 50 states.
Where do you see travel meds to go in, let's say, 5 years? Let's start there. So
right now, I'm still a small company and I do all of the consults myself. In 5 years, I'm hoping that we have become so big that I can hire other doctors to provide. And, I want to be able to choose the passion for travel and will treat patients the way that I treat patients and want to be treated.
Yes. And I do see that. I do see Travel Meds to go as a platform that connects doctors such as yourself with anyone who needs the service that you provide. Mm-hmm. And so let's go. Do you want to talk about the startup, or you just want to mention travel?
No.
Go ahead. You're busy. It's like, what's the time? And by the way, quickly, it's a grandmother, right?
Yes. So I actually have. I've got several things that I do, but two more things that I've started doing that I'm really passionate about. One is I'm doing student health evaluations online. So there are a lot of students that come in, especially from overseas, that don't necessarily have all the vaccines that are required for college and university in the US. So I am there to talk to you about what you need, to write prescriptions for that you may need, to get lab work, and to do the online physical. There are a lot of schools now that are allowing online physicals. So that's one space, but the one that I'm probably even excited about is providing PrEP treatment for our LGBTQ population. That's a mouthful. And for who don't know, preventative treatment for HIV. So the PrEP treatments are daily and they help prevent from HIV.
You are a busy person. When I talk to some young people who just have one job, they
right.
don't have time to even do something else outside of the one job in their social life.
Yes. Well, I'm traveling and doing my jobs and enjoying my life. So
and still happy and smiling.
Yes.
You must be having a great partner.
That oh my goodness, I don't know what I would do without him. Yes.
Yes, and so I mean, this is such a great chat. I wish we can go on, but as they say, I mean, every good thing has some point. Mm-hmm. We can have you again and keep talking on something else and building on this. Maybe the questions that will come, who knows? I hope there'll be questions. I think you are the perfect person to to tell to the listeners, this podcast is to really inspire the next generation, especially Black youth, the global African diaspora. I usually refer them as such. As a medical doctor, which is not also a small thing to reach, as a startup founder of 2 companies, where the wisdom, inspire. Tell us something that a word that you like to leave to end on.
Just that, despite the adversities, you are in charge of destiny. And if you dream it and believe in yourself, then you can do it. And, we need you. We need Black youth and people of color to get in these positions so that you can inspire other youth and people to do the same.
Thank you. You're in charge of your own destiny. Yes. Where can we find you as we conclude?
So you can find me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me under on LinkedIn, but you can find me under Travel Meds to Go. That's a number 2, travelmeds2go.com. And you can find on Instagram. I'm now on TikTok. I just got on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook under the Travel Meds to Go.
Wonderful. I will share all those links. Dr. Allen, it's been such a great pleasure to have you on the show. Really, thank you so much.
All right. You take care.
Thank you. Bye.